The
Let's
afternoon
take
sun
action
floated
and
lazily
embrace
above the
inner
hills,
peace.
painting the valley below
Achieving
in
inner
hues of
peace
soft
is a
gold
personal
and pale
and
blue.
unique journey.
A warm
Here
breeze
are some
whispered through the
general
tall
approaches
grass,
that might be
carrying the
helpful.
scent of wildflowers
1.
and sun-baked
Meditate
earth.
regularly.
From her spot near the
Meditation
crest of the
encourages
hill,
a clear
Emma could
mind
see
and
everything.
calm spirit,
The narrow
allowing
country
you to
road
disconnect
winding
from
like a
worldly
ribbon through the
concerns
valley.
and focus on
The
your inner
airfield
self.
far in the distance,
2.
and the thousands of
Maintain
tiny
physical
figures
health.
gathered around it,
Regular
glimmering in the
exercise, a
sunlight
healthy
like grains of
diet,
sand.
and good sleep habits
driven
can
out here alone,
significantly improve
an
your
hour
mental
past the
state.
last sign of town,
3.
just to
Spend
escape the
time
crowds.
in nature.
The
Whether
annual
it's
air
a
show
walk
was
in
one
the
of the
park,
biggest events of the year.
stargazing,
And
or
while most
listening to
people
the
loved
ocean,
the noise and spectacle,
spending time in
Emma
nature
preferred
can
the quiet
effectively
awe
help
of it
you
all.
achieve peace.
She didn't want
Let's
vendors
take action
yelling,
and
kids
embrace
crying,
inner peace.
or the smell of fried food competing with jet fuel. She just wanted sky, clean, endless, and alive. A hawk circled lazily overhead as she unpacked her small camera and a bottle of water. The grass brushed her knees as she sat down, brushing dust from her jeans. The sound of laughter and distant engines drifted faintly up the slope, but up here, the world felt untouched. Then came the first roar. It started as a low growl, deep enough to vibrate through the soles of her shoes. Emma's head lifted instantly. The noise grew into a thunderous boom that seemed to split the sky in half. Somewhere behind the clouds, something massive was moving, fast. She stood, shading her eyes against the sun just in time to see a streak of silver slicing through the air. The F-22 Raptor. Even from this distance, it looked otherworldly. Its sharp, angular frame caught the sunlight like a blade of molten steel, its every movement deliberate and precise. The jet didn't just fly, it owned the sky. Emma had seen footage of it before, but nothing compared to this. The way it maneuvered, rolling gracefully before shooting straight up into the clouds, defying gravity, it was pure poetry in motion. The sound hit her next. A deafening roar that wasn't just heard but felt. The air trembled. Her heart pounded. A wave of wind swept across the hill, bending the grass flat. She laughed softly in disbelief, gripping her camera but forgetting to even lift it. As the fighter soared overhead again, she could see the sunlight glint off its canopy. For a heartbeat, it looked close enough to touch. She felt something stir inside her, a spark of wonder she hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was the speed, the power, or simply the beauty of it. She couldn't explain it, but in that moment she felt connected to the sky, small but alive, and then without thinking, she raised her hand and waved. It was a foolish, spontaneous gesture, the kind a child might make when a plane passes overhead. A private little hello to a machine that would never notice her. The jet was hundreds of feet in the air, moving faster than sound. There was no chance the pilot could see a single person standing on a distant hill. Still, she waved anyway. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The jet continued on its path, climbing, diving, spinning through its routine. Emma smiled awkwardly, shaking her head at herself. "Nice one," she muttered under her breath. "Because obviously he can see you." But then, something changed. The F-22 reached the far end of the valley, leveled out, and began to slow. The sound shifted, the pitch of the engines dropping as it banked sharply to the left. Emma froze, lowering her hand halfway. The jet wasn't continuing toward the next maneuver. It was turning back. The sunlight flashed across its wings as it angled in her direction. The crowd far below reacted instantly. She could hear the faint roar of cheers carried on the wind. But to Emma, it felt like time had slowed. Her mind raced to explain what she was seeing. Maybe it was part of the routine. Maybe the pilot had to make a loop. But the trajectory looked different, off-pattern, almost curious. The jet grew larger in the sky, closing the distance between them. The roar swelled until it filled her ears, her chest, her entire body. The air shimmered with heat. Emma's hair whipped around her face as she stumbled back a step, shielding her eyes. The F-22 cut directly across the sky above her. So low she could see every line of its body, the twin engines blazing like suns, the shape of the wings crisp against the light, and for the briefest impossible second, she thought she saw the cockpit tilt just slightly toward her. Her breath caught. She couldn't see the pilot's face, only a flash of the dark visor reflecting sunlight. But the motion felt deliberate. A small acknowledgement, a nod, then as quickly as it came, the moment was gone. The Raptor shot upward again, disappearing into the glare of the afternoon sun. The thunder faded to a distant hum, leaving only the whisper of the wind behind. Emma stood rooted to the ground, her heart hammering in her chest. Her raised hand trembled before she slowly lowered it. The world was silent again, except for the rustle of the grass and the faint echo of her pulse in her ears. Had that really happened? She turned in a slow circle, scanning the sky. The jet was gone, but the vapor trails lingered like white scars across the blue. A laugh slipped from her lips, soft and disbelieving. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe the pilot had been turning for the crowd. But deep down, something inside her insisted otherwise. The timing. The angle. The way it slowed just after she waved. Her smile widened. "No way," she whispered. Yet she couldn't stop smiling. For the rest of the afternoon, she stayed on that hill, watching the sky long after the Raptor had vanished. The grass swayed gently around her, golden under the lowering sun. Somewhere far above, the jet continued its routine for the crowd, but for Emma, the show was over. She had waved, and for one miraculous moment, the sky had waved back. For a long while, Emma didn't move. The hilltop felt impossibly still after the thunder of the jet. The air carried the faint smell of burnt fuel and hot metal, drifting down from somewhere high above. Her heartbeat hadn't quite slowed. It thudded in her chest like an echo of the engines that had just shaken the sky. She told herself it was coincidence. That's all it could be. The F-22 had turned because it was supposed to. It was part of the performance, a carefully rehearsed maneuver that just happened to line up with her little wave. But it hadn't felt like that. Something about the way the jet had tilted, the way it slowed for just a moment, it had felt personal. Still, she laughed quietly to herself and tried to shake off the thought. "Don't be ridiculous," she murmured. "He didn't see you." The sun had dipped slightly lower, warming the sky to a soft amber. Emma turned her gaze toward the airfield far below. The crowd looked like a living patchwork of color and motion, the sound of their cheers rising faintly through the air. More jets were scheduled to perform, the Blue Angels, an old World War II Mustang, but Emma couldn't bring herself to leave. She was still thinking about the Raptor. Then, just as she knelt to pack up her camera, the sound returned. At first, it was faint, a low hum threading through the breeze, but she recognized it instantly. Her head snapped up, eyes scanning the horizon. There it was. The same F-22 Raptor burst from behind a drifting cloud, sunlight exploding across its body. The crowd below erupted into cheers again, a roar that traveled up the valley. The jet's engines screamed with raw power as it climbed steeply, then leveled off high above the fields. Emma's breath caught. "No way," she whispered. "He's back?" She watched as the Raptor performed a sharp roll, clean, precise, like a dancer flipping through air, and then descended in a steep, controlled dive. Its silver surface flashed like a mirror as it angled toward the hills, toward her. The realization hit her a split second before the sound did. The thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the air. Emma staggered back, the sheer force of the jet's movement vibrating through the ground. The F-22 swept closer, its wings banking slightly as it passed overhead, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each turn smoother and lower than the last. The crowd below went wild, but Emma barely noticed them. Her eyes were locked on the jet as it completed one final arc through the valley. The vapor trails hung in the air like ribbons of smoke, curling and dissolving in the sunlight. This wasn't part of the airshow schedule. She knew it. She'd read it online that morning. Every routine was carefully timed and approved. Nothing like this was on it. Her pulse quickened. He's breaking formation. Her heart thudded faster. He's breaking routine. And yet every move he made was perfect, graceful, deliberate, impossible. The F-22 climbed again, rolled once, then descended into a maneuver she'd never seen before. The aircraft turned almost vertically in mid-air, nose down, engines roaring in full thrust as it pivoted on its own axis, something that defied physics and reason. The crowd's screams rose again, distant but frantic. Even the announcer's voice, faint through the speakers, sounded stunned. "Ladies and gentlemen, that is not part of today's flight plan." Emma couldn't move. The wind tore through her hair as she stared up in disbelief. The Raptor's engines flared, and for an instant, it hovered, literally hovered, in midair before shooting skyward in a burst of speed that left twin white contrails behind. Her mouth fell open. That move, known as the Herbst maneuver, was almost never performed outside of testing. It was risky, even for an F-22, and yet the pilot had just done it. For her, at least that's what it felt like. As the roar faded again, Emma's eyes burned from staring too long into the light. She blinked hard, trying to steady her breathing. Her legs felt weak. The sky shimmered with the fading trails, each one catching the orange of the setting sun like strokes of fire. She laughed, nervously this time, pressing a hand over her chest to feel her heart hammering. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered. "Who does that?" Her phone buzzed from her pocket, a flood of notifications lighting up the screen. Social media was already exploding with clips and comments from people at the airfield. F-22 pulls insane move, pilot breaking protocol. Was that part of the show? That Raptor just did something unreal. Emma watched one short video someone had uploaded, a shaky recording showing the jet performing that impossible turn, its silhouette framed by the sun. The camera caught the crowd's collective gasp as the Raptor climbed vertically again, vapor swirling around its wings. The comments were full of excitement, confusion, disbelief. No one seemed to know what had just happened. And yet, looking at it, Emma felt something she couldn't explain, a quiet certainty that it hadn't been random. The timing, the direction, the way it had looped back toward the hill. It was all too deliberate. Her thoughts raced. Could he really have seen her? From that distance? Maybe through a targeting camera or thermal scanner? Or was it just the world playing tricks on her imagination? She turned her eyes back to the sky, watching the last shimmer of contrails fade into gold. The air felt charged, electric, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. The pilot, whoever he was, had just done something reckless, beautiful, and utterly impossible. And somehow, Emma felt it was for her. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the distant echo of cheers from the valley. She could still hear the announcer's voice struggling to sound composed. "Well, folks, that was definitely one for the history books." Emma smiled faintly, whispering to no one. "Yeah, you could say that." As the sky deepened into orange and pink, she stayed where she was, rooted to the same spot. The moment felt unreal, like a dream she was afraid to wake from. She didn't have proof, just a feeling that the pilot up there, whoever he was, had noticed her tiny wave and decided to break the rules of the sky for it. The impossible turn had happened, and it had changed everything. Emma didn't sleep echoes of the airshow faded. The four words glowed on her screen long after midnight. By the time Emma climbed down from the hill, did you see it? The valley was washed in amber light. She read them over and over again until they blurred into her reflection in the glass of her phone. The message still hear distant applause, almost casual, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. But it carried the weight of everything that had happened, circling around that impossible turn, the impossible turn, the way the jet had seemed to answer her wave. Someone somewhere up there had seen her. She sat behind the wheel for nearly 5 minutes without starting the engine, frozen in disbelief. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. Then finally, but her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the contrails had already dissolved. Her thumb hovered over send for what felt like an eternity. She felt the kind of silence that comes only after something extraordinary. The message whooshed away, the kind that hums in your chest and refuses to fade. A second passed. Her phone buzzed again. She waited. Another video, loud in her ears. This one was clearer. A close-up. She left the phone on the nightstand, crawled into bed. It showed the F-22 banking toward the hills, climbing, rolling, and then freezing mid-air before blasting. The world had moved on. The camera zoomed in just long enough to catch a glint of sunlight bouncing off the airshow protocol. Right before it vanished, the Air Force released a brief statement. The caption read, "An isolated, unscheduled maneuver occurred during training." Emma replayed the clip. No public safety risk. They didn't name the pilot. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the engines. Emma smiled faintly as she scrolled through the articles. The internet had already turned it into a passenger seat and started the jet that drew a heart. The headlights cut through the mist as she drove down the winding road. Even a few racing faster than the wheels. But for Emma, it wasn't a mystery. Sleep refused to come. And somewhere deep down, engines kept echoing through her memory. Around midnight, she got up, made tea, a new message by the window. Falcon 1, staring at the patch of sky above the dark trees. Sunset. A thin crescent moon hung there, she glanced silver and distant. 3:07 p.m. On impulse,
Sunset was in
she
less
opened
than
her
3
laptop
hours.
and searched for the
By the
pilot
time
roster
Emma
for the
reached the
day's
hill,
air show. The light had already
list appeared
softened to
easily.
gold.
7 names.
The sky
all
stretched
military
clear
test
and
pilots.
wide. The air
Her
cool with
eyes
the
stopped
stopped
on
pine
one.
and earth.
Captain
She
Ryan
parked the
Cole.
car in the same spot
He
as
was the
before.
F-22
The pulse
demonstration
quickening
pilot.
as she climbed
Call
to the
sign,
top.
Falcon 1.
Everything looked the same.
There wasn't much
Whispering
public
grass,
information.
the
just
valley
a few
spread out
interviews.
below.
A short biography,
But the air felt
and a handful of
charged,
photos showing
alive.
a tall man in a flight suit. She stood
His
where
helmet
she
tucked
had
under
waved
one
the
arm.
first time. He had the
Her
calm,
hands trembling
sharp-eyed look
slightly
of
and
someone who
scanned the
understood
horizon.
both precision and
Minutes
danger.
passed.
Emma leaned closer
world
to
was
the
quiet,
screen, except for the rustling
The article
wind and
mentioned
the hum
that
of
Captain
crickets.
Cole was known for
The sky
pushing
was a
the
canvas
boundaries
waiting
of
for a
aero
brushstroke.
control.
And then she
She heard
smiled
it.
faintly. A faint rumble.
That's one
at
way to
first,
describe
far
what he
away
did
and
today.
low. Scrolling
Then,
further,
steadily,
she found a quote
it
from
grew.
him during a press briefing.
Louder.
Closer.
Sometimes
The sound
flight isn't
crawled
about
under her skin
performance.
like electricity.
It's about connection.
She lifted her eyes.
You
and
move in
there,
the sky the
cutting
way
through
the
the
world
clouds like a
moves
streak of
inside
silver.
you.
Was
The
the
words hit her
F-22
harder than she expected.
Her heart
She
skipped.
closed the laptop softly.
You actually
and sat
came.
back.
She whispered.
Connection.
The jet descended
exactly
smoothly,
what she had
slower
felt.
than before.
The impossible
late
sense
sunlight
that for a few
igniting its
seconds
metallic skin.
she wasn't just watching.
It rolled once,
She was
casually,
seen.
then steadied
The next
itself
morning,
in level
fog
flight
rolled
above the
in
valley.
thick and slow across
Emma
the
lifted
hills.
a hand again.
Emma returned
just like
to the
before,
same spot
and
waved.
camera slung over her shoulder. For a second, the air show
Nothing
grounds
happened.
below were quiet now.
Then,
empty
the
tents,
F-22
tire
dipped
tracks
its
in the
wings.
grass. A deliberate,
faint smell
graceful
of
jet
jet
fuel lingering in
A
the
wave.
air. Her throat
But she
tightened.
wasn't there for the show anymore.
It was an acknowledgement,
She found the
unmistakable,
same patch of
human,
grass
and
where she had
wordless.
stood the day before.
The jet climbed higher.
The wind was
then
cooler,
began a
carrying
series
the
of
promise of
slow,
rain.
breathtaking maneuvers.
The valley spread before
Not
her
showy
like a
this
sleeping
time.
giant,
elegant,
wrapped in
controlled,
gray mist,
like an artist painting
For a
the
moment,
air.
she wondered if
each
she was
turn,
being foolish,
each roll,
waiting
seemed
for something
perfectly
that wasn't
timed to
coming
the rhythm
back.
of her own heartbeat.
Then,
the
a low
Raptor
rumble
glinted in the
rolled
sunlight
through the
like
sky.
liquid steel.
Her head jerked
its
up.
contrails weaving
The
faint
fog
white
trembled
ribbons
as if
behind
something
it.
massive was moving above it.
Then something unexpected
later,
happened. A streak of
the
motion
jet
cut
released
through
a
the
thin
clouds,
burst of
a
colored
dark,
smoke,
sleek shape flashing
crimson
silver
and
in the
blue.
weak sunlight. It wasn't
The
part of a
F-22
standard demo. Emma's breath caught
The
in her
smoke trails
throat, curled across the sky.
You've got to be
forming the
kidding
faint
me,
outline of
she
letters.
whispered, eyes
The
wide.
curves were rough, fading
The jet
fast in
descended
wind.
through the mist,
but
for a
slower
few
this
seconds,
time,
Emma
more
could read
deliberate. It wasn't part of a
I
show.
am.
There was
Her
no
hand
audience,
flew to her
no
mouth.
cameras. A laugh
The
escaped.
air around it
half
shimmered as it
disbelief,
leveled
half
off
pure
above the
joy.
valley. Wings
The letters
gleaming
broke
wet
apart
from
in the
wind,
fog, dissolving into
Then,
color. In a graceful,
the message
almost
had landed.
casual motion, he'd written to her
It
in the
banked
sky
toward the hill.
Down below, the
toward
valley
her.
was still empty. No audience
stood
this time.
frozen.
No one
The
to
camera
witness
hanging
what was
useless
happening
at her side.
except her and the
The roar
endless
grew
open
louder,
sky pressing against her chest.
She raised both hands
When
now,
the jet
waving
passed directly
wildly,
overhead,
laughing
it
through
didn't
tears.
roll or climb.
The Raptor looped
Instead,
once more,
it traced
then
a perfect
soared
wide
upward,
circle above
engines
her,
roaring,
a loop
a
so
pillar of
steady
light
it almost
cutting
seemed
through the
gentle.
clouds.
It didn't
Something
return this
impossible
time.
happened. It
As
climbed
the
until it was
F-22
only a
climbed
glint
into the
against
thin
the burning
clouds.
orange horizon.
Its contrails began to twist.
Then it was gone.
Slowly, deliberately.
The silence
into a
that
shape.
followed was deep and
Two
reverent.
sweeping arcs intersected
Emma stood
in the
there
air,
for a long time,
forming a
the
rough
last
but
light of
unmistakable
sunset
warming
hot.
her face. Emma's mouth fell
The wind
open.
carried a single echo of
Her
sound.
mind tried to reject
the lingering
it,
memory
to
of
explain
jet
it as
engines
coincidence
fading into
or wind
distance.
or vapor currents.
She whispered into
But
the
no.
sky. The pattern
Thank
held.
you.
Clear
That night,
and
another
intentional,
message appeared,
glowing white
Falcon
against
1.
the gray sky.
Mission complete.
A sound
Had to
escaped
see
her
if you'd
throat.
wave again.
Half laugh,
Emma
half smile.
smiled, blinking away a tear.
She lifted
Her
a
fingers
trembling hand
hesitated
to her
above
mouth
the
as her
screen
eyes
before she
blurred with
typed
tears
back,
she didn't
"I did.
understand. Always will.
The jet roared
No
once more, a
response
deep,
came,
but somehow she
thunderous
knew that was
note
the end
that
of it.
rolled through the valley
Some
like a
stories
heartbeat.
didn't need explanations.
And then it climbed sharply.
Some moments were too
disappearing
beautiful to
into
be
the clouds
dissected.
again.
For her, it was
The
enough
heart-shaped
that for one
lingered for a
impossible
few
day
seconds
before the
The
wind
laws
began
of
to
physics
pull
and
it
chance
apart.
had bent just enough for two
By the
strangers.
time the last wisp
one on the
faded,
ground,
Emma
one in
was
the
on her
sky,
knees in the grass,
to find each
laughing
other
through
across
tears.
the vastness of
You're
air
insane,
and silence.
she whispered to the empty sky.
Weeks passed.
Completely insane. Her
The
phone
news cycle
vibrated.
moved on.
A notification
The
from a
F-22
local
news
demonstration
page.
team was
She
reassigned
opened it
to
with
another
shaking
base out
fingers.
west. No one ever
Breaking,
confirmed the pilot's
unscheduled
name, but
F-22
sometimes,
flyover
when the evenings
recorded
were
above
still
Gray
and the
Valley
clouds
this morning.
burned gold with
Officials
sunset,
confirmed no cause
Emma would
for
walk
alarm.
back up that hill.
Pilot identity
She'd
undisclosed.
stand where
No
the
cause
grass
for
was
alarm.
pressed flat.
She let out out a
and the
shaky
wind
laugh.
sang through the trees.
Easy for them to say.
And she'd raise her hand
She
to the
replayed
sky,
the event in her
just in
mind.
case.
The sound,
And sometimes
the movement, the heart,
faint and
distant
distant,
vapor.
she'd hear it.
The soft,
It had been real.
low
Too
hum of a
perfect to
jet
be
engine high
imagination.
above the clouds.
And somewhere up
She'd
there,
smile.
in that invisible
Close
expanse
her
of
eyes
the
and
sky
whisper,
that night, the
"I
pilot
felt
knew
it."
exactly what he had
glowed on her
done.
screen long after midnight. Did you see it? She read them over and over again until they blurred into her reflection in the glass of her phone. The message was simple, almost casual, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened. The wave, the impossible turn, the heart in the clouds. Someone, somewhere up there, had seen her, For a long time, she just stared, frozen in disbelief. Then finally, she typed a reply. Yes, I saw it. Her thumb hovered over send for what felt like an eternity. Then, she pressed it. The message whooshed away into the digital ether. A second passed, then another. She waited, heartbeat loud in her ears, but no reply came. She left the phone on the nightstand, crawled into bed, and stared at the ceiling until dawn streaked pale light across the room. By morning, the world had moved on. The news was buzzing with the mystery pilot who had broken airshow protocol. The Air Force released a brief statement. An isolated, unscheduled maneuver occurred during training. No public safety risk. They didn't name the pilot. They never do. Emma smiled faintly as she scrolled through the articles. The internet had already turned it into a legend, the jet that drew a heart. There were slow-motion clips, memes, even a few conspiracy theories. But for Emma, it wasn't a mystery. She knew what she'd seen, and somewhere deep down, she knew who had done it. Her phone buzzed again. A new message, Falcon 1. Same place. Sunset. Her breath caught. She glanced at the clock, 3:07 p.m. Sunset was in less than 3 hours. By the time Emma reached the hill, the light had already softened to gold. The sky stretched clear and wide, the air cool with the smell of pine and earth. She parked the car in the same spot as before, her pulse quickening as she climbed to the top. Everything looked the same. The whispering grass, the valley spread out below. But the air felt charged, alive. She stood where she had waved the first time, her hands trembling slightly, and scanned the horizon. Minutes passed. The world was quiet except for the rustling wind and the hum of crickets. The sky was a canvas waiting for a brushstroke. And then she heard it, a faint rumble at first, far away and low. Then, steadily, it grew. Louder, closer. The sound crawled under her skin like electricity. She lifted her eyes, and there, cutting through the clouds like a streak of silver, was the F-22. Her heart skipped. "You actually came," she whispered. The jet descended smoothly, slower than before, the late sunlight igniting its metallic skin. It rolled once, casually, then steadied itself in level flight above the valley. Emma lifted a hand again, just like before, and waved. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the F-22 dipped its wings. A deliberate, graceful tilt. A wave. Her throat tightened. It was an acknowledgement, unmistakable, human, and wordless. The jet climbed higher, then began a series of slow, breathtaking maneuvers. Not showy this time, elegant, controlled, like an artist painting the air. Each turn, each roll seemed perfectly timed to the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The Raptor glinted in the sunlight like liquid steel, its contrails weaving faint white ribbons behind it. Then something unexpected happened. The jet released a thin burst of colored smoke, crimson and blue. It wasn't part of a standard demo. The smoke trails curled across the sky, forming the faint outline of letters. The curves were rough, fading fast in the wind, but for a few seconds Emma could read it. "I am," her hand flew to her mouth. A laugh escaped, half disbelief, half pure joy. The letters broke apart in the wind, dissolving into color, but the message had landed. He'd written to her in the sky. Down below, the valley was still empty. No audience this time, no one to witness what was happening except her and the endless open sky. She raised both hands now, waving wildly, laughing through tears. The Raptor looped once more, then soared upward, engines roaring, a pillar of light cutting through the clouds. It didn't return this time. It climbed until it was only a glint against the burning orange horizon. Then it was gone. The silence that followed was deep and reverent. Emma stood there for a long time, the last light of sunset warming her face. The wind carried a single echo of sound, the lingering memory of jet engines fading into distance. She whispered into the sky, "Thank you." That night, another message appeared, Falcon 1, mission complete. "Had to see if you'd wave again." Emma smiled, blinking away a tear. Her fingers hesitated above the screen before she typed back, "I did. Always will." No response came, but somehow she knew that was the end of it. Some stories didn't need explanations. Some moments were too beautiful to be dissected. For her, it was enough that for one impossible day, the laws of physics and chance had bent just enough for two strangers, one on the ground, one in the sky, to find each other across the vastness of air and silence. Weeks passed. The news cycle moved on. The F-22 demonstration team was reassigned to another base out west. No one ever confirmed the pilot's name, but sometimes, when the evenings were still and the clouds burned gold with sunset, Emma would walk back up that hill. She'd stand where the grass was pressed flat and the wind sang through the trees, and she'd raise her hand to the sky, just in case. And sometimes, faint and distant, she'd hear it, the soft, low hum of a jet engine high above the clouds. She'd smile, close her eyes and whisper, "Hi, Falcon."